Tonight is a question and answer, and the question can be, it should be from you guys. Don't make me ask myself questions. Anything that has to do with meditation or your internal practice or your life, not specifically how do you throw this punch, how do you throw this kick. So something about life, something that I can kind of sink my teeth into, and we can think about it a little bit. So just like every week that I do this, the disclaimer is these are not the answers to these questions. The answers that I have are not written in stone anywhere. These are just the answers that I have from my experience. And if you ask me again in 10 years, I might give you a totally different answer. And that means that I will have used this time well. If I give you the same exact answer years from now, it means that I wasted my time. And so did you. So your questions, and if you guys are online, you can submit your questions in the comments and I will be able to read them. Let's make your questions concise, to the point, and like leave your ego out of it. It doesn't have to be the best question, the most insightful, amazing question that makes you seem very impressive and like I've really been thinking about this stuff for a long time. You can ask me anything that's been on your mind, something about meditation, something about life. So questions, go. Yes, ma'am.
My question starts with this whole feeling that just to trust that everything works itself out.
So like surrender, trust that things will work out well. So your question is about finding the balance between surrendering and like letting it happen, and like pushing and trying to make something happen that's not happening yet. And how does all that work? I'm going to do my best. So there are a couple of different directions I can go with on this. One that I haven't talked about in a little minute is we want to set goals and we want to plan. We want to have a direction in mind, and we want to push hard to make these goals happen. And at some point, as you are going towards a specific goal, something will happen, almost guaranteed, something will happen that makes it obvious that it's not going to go exactly the way that you wanted it to go. And this could be with a small goal, this could be with a big goal, this could be with your whole life, this could be with a marriage, this could be with a career, this could be with anything. It could be with, I'm trying to make cookies tonight and it's just not working right. But at some point, a sign will become very clear to you, and you know that this sign is clear because you're thinking about it right now. It's like, I know what he's talking about. He's talking about this thing, this time that I totally just ignored it and it turned out so wrong and so bad. I kept pushing. At that point, you want to be able to surrender, but not in the way that most people are thinking right now as I'm talking about it. So this is, you're thinking like, I'm in a war and I've got to win this war. And if I surrender, I die, and so do all of my soldiers, and it's a disaster. That's not what I'm talking about at all. What I'm talking about is the opposite of that. If you take the war analogy, it's like you're throwing all of your soldiers at this, at this cliff, and they just keep falling off the cliff. And what you really need to do is just go around this way. And it becomes obvious at a certain point that what you need to do is actually just change something slightly or do a complete U-turn. The other analogy I like to use is you're driving and you're on the 405 and you're trying to get to San Diego, And at some point you realize, wait, I've been driving north on the 405 and there is no amount of pushing in that direction that will ever get you south to San Diego. You literally cannot even drive around the globe because you'll run into the ocean and drown. So you have to, turn around. And I guess your question is really how do we recognize that there will be times where it is so obvious that it's like beating you over the head with a stick, and you just know for sure it's time for me to adjust. It's time for me to surrender to the reality of my circumstances. The reality is not going to allow for the way that I really was attached to this thing going. It's not going to allow for this to happen. So I have to, like push hands in life. I've got to feel the energy and then play with it rather than pretending that it's not happening. It would be really nice to recognize this very early on, to be able to recognize as soon as possible that this thing is not going to happen, so that we don't waste time, so that we don't become embarrassed by it. But that's not always going to happen. So let's at least make sure that we're doing it when it becomes very obvious, when it becomes painfully obvious. We don't stick up for lost time. We don't keep pushing in the direction that is not going to work. And we are aware enough to see the writing on the wall. But if you're going to catch it earlier, it's going to be through meditation. It's going to be through introspection. It's going to be by opening yourself up to possibilities. I was listening to a story. It was probably on NPR, because I love listening to NPR because it's not, crazy, everything terrible with the world. It's just some of it's terrible with the world. But I think it was somebody explaining this idea that, like, if somebody cannot understand the reality of what's going on, they've bought so deeply into a lie. And this specific story was about politics, I think, but they've bought so deeply into the lie that they cannot understand the reality of it. It doesn't even have to be that you've bought so deeply into a lie. It's just that you are so convinced of this one thing that you cannot understand the other side of it. It's due to a lack of imagination. You can't imagine that what you think is true isn't true. Because if you could imagine it, in the instant that you imagine it and what you're imagining is actually what's real, you will immediately understand that. You will, in that moment, have that like aha moment. Oh man, I've been so dumb. I've been so sure that it was this way, but it's clearly this other way. You have to just imagine. And I mean, really imagine it. Really, in your mind, make it real that this other thing, that the other side of it is actually true. And this is incredibly important for us in relationships, for us being a great partner in the dojo, for us just being with other people in life, because we have to be able to empathize with their situation and understand, imagine what they're going through to the greatest possible extent and detail, and really feel it. Because if we're able to do that, our relationships will be so much better. Our experience of life and of each other will be so much better if we can put ourselves in somebody else's shoes and really imagine what they're going through, and really imagine their point of view, and imagine how what we've been just running into over and over again. Why isn't this working? Because maybe what I've been seeing, believing so fervently, and I'm so certain about, isn't true. And the better we get at imagining what's possible, we'll be able to pick it up more quickly when we're going down the wrong path. I've got a question here from another student. How do you deal with someone you love, but that person doesn't live to their full potential with 2 exclamation marks after it. Okay. So this is a great question. As we are talking about relationships, this might not be as obvious as like this person really screwed up. It's like they're just not quite living to their full potential. But this, I can see there's a little bit of emotion behind this because there's 2 exclamation marks, and it's frustrating, right? The real part to get with this question, or something that's very important for us to understand, is there's love behind this. There is, I care so much about this person. I love them and I want them to live up to their highest potential. And how do I deal with, the question is, how do I deal with that person? We want to first be able to deal with the situation and deal with what's going on here, which might have a lot to do with the first question of, am I expecting things to go a very specific way and they're not going to go this way, so I've got to play with the energy and play with reality. But let's say this is somebody who I really do know is capable of so much more. Their potential is huge. And I always personally try to think of, as all of you, all of my students, all of everybody in my life, I try to think of people as being huge, giants, capable of absolutely anything. Because if I am thinking of people in that way, I'm naturally kind of pushing them to be their best, to reach their highest potential. And yet, you'll notice how if you don't reach that potential in class, like, look, I expect all of you tonight, I expected all of you tonight to have a perfect crescent kick. Your leg was straight and your kick was way up by the head and it was beautiful. And yet when I saw your crescent kick not quite looking like that, I wasn't looking at you like, oh, this is terrible. I can't believe this is what you bring to class tonight. This is it. I expect it fully, and then when I see what I've got to work with, I go, okay, this is what we're going to try to do. This is how I know you can tweak this to be better, to reach the higher potential of your crescent kick. And I know what we're talking about is not crescent kicks. It's something more serious. It's something more, pressing and important. Not that crescent kicks are not important, but they're not quite, I think, what this question is about. So, but I think in the same vein, what we want to be able to do is not be attached to the specific way that we have in mind that this person is going to live up to the potential that we see for them. So maybe you're talking about a kid, a child of yours. In the Prophet, Khalil Gibran uses the analogy of a parent pulling back the bowstring and their child is the arrow. And they point it in a direction and they let it go and their child flies. And they are probably not going to land exactly where you want them to land, just like the arrow is not going to land exactly where you want it to land. But we've given them energy and love, and they go. And wherever they land is going to be up to them, and it's going to be up to the circumstances of the day. You know, the wind blows and somebody moved the target or whatever. But you understand that we can pull back the bowstring very far, and we can aim really high and truly believe in this arrow's flight. We can truly believe in each other. Yet where they fall, if we've given them what we can give, then sometimes what's left for us to give is just more love and acceptance. And we can continue to push each other to reach our highest potential from a place of love and acceptance. And our experience of that is going to be very different, because every time we look at that person, we're not like, oh, this is so disappointing. Because we accept where they are, who they are, and we love them for who they are. And part of love is wanting them to be their best and continuing to push them to be their best. But somebody else's best is hardly ever going to line up exactly with what we want for them in a specific attached way. So be aware of that. First and foremost, we are not attached to it looking exactly the way that we want it to. And then maybe they fall way short of where we know they can go. Okay, so we keep pushing, keep giving love, keep giving acceptance, and keep pushing. I read this book very early on in my martial arts practice. I believe it's called The Road Less Traveled. And it is a really nice book that gets into a couple of different topics, but centers a lot on relationships. And the author, I think it's Peck, I believe, draws a distinction between different kinds of relationships. And a lot of what people think of as being love is actually a very unhealthy kind of attachment, or what is it called? A codependency. And what we really want to think of as being love is this like real desire and push to help somebody grow and become who they really want to become who their highest self wants them to be, not just what they feel like being today. You know, somebody's staying in bed all day because they don't feel like getting up. Maybe they have to do that a couple of days, but when we push them to truly achieve what they want to achieve, that's the best way that we can deal with somebody. So good luck. I got a question here that's been typed to me too. Actually, let me take another one here. Who had one? Charlie, go ahead.
Yeah, so coming off the answer to the first question you mentioned, the other side is the other party, do you imagine?
Yeah, to be able to imagine what somebody else is experiencing and going through.
Right. So what if just fundamentally you guys have two different complete views, views of this point? Just it's the conflict just suddenly just I guess as the way you guys are loving is very different. And then how do you resolve those kind of issues? Because seems to me this looks like this seems like a problem that no party can compromise. This is what they believe in. And then if one of them steps back, it would just break their entire world. So
yeah, I got it. So dealing with a situation where two people are so entrenched with their beliefs, and really to both people what they believe and their experience of life is reality, and they're not shaking from it. And it might be that they are not going to actually be any better off, nor will you be better off, right? You can have a situation, and even in a relationship with somebody, where this person's values say this and your values say that, and it is there's no actual like fact-based discrepancy here. It's more like a subjective thing. Now, it could actually be, this is more like what I was describing earlier for the first question, is that one person is right because the facts are in line and this person is wrong. And I'm not going to talk about that, although you could take my answer and kind of weave it into that. But you're saying like neither person is moving, and we got to be able to accept that. If we want this person in our life, we can't keep pushing against this wall that's not moving, because it's not moving. And not only is it a waste of time, but it can actually be really detrimental to a relationship. So let's say that you're in a situation like that. It's values. You've been raised totally differently, and you've got to accept where this other person is, where they're coming from, and where they're going. This is a very tricky part about what I was talking about with the second question, actually, is when we love somebody, we oftentimes, what we think of being love is infatuation or attachment with who they are now or who we want them to become, not who they want to be and where they're going. And that's not real love. Real love is surrender. You've got to let this person become who they're going to be. So one important point here in my experience is to choose or to fall in love with or to really hope for this person to go in the direction that they've chosen for themselves and reach, you know, their highest potential, their best place, even if that is growing away from you, and especially if that's growing away from you. And when you're in it with somebody who's growing away from you, the experience of that is very painful because it engages our ego. Our ego doesn't like that when somebody thinks differently or lives differently from us because it makes us question ourselves. That's usually why it's so painful for us. But if you can really accept that this other person is on their path and that you're on your path, and you can even, you know, walk different paths but stay side by side with each other, that is great. And this is a beautiful thing to be able to have in a relationship, in a friendship, whatever. There are certain things that don't work in any kind of relationship, and you don't need to make them work. But there are plenty of people who have actually wonderful relationships, friendships are romantic, long-term, great, productive, beautiful relationships where they have, you know, very different views on a very fundamental thing. And they have decided that, you know what, I totally accept this person for who they are, and I can actually appreciate them even more because of this. And I can be with this person in a way that is like a challenge to my own beliefs and to my own ego that I accept, and I actually cherish it because of how it causes me to grow. And it's a what can seem like a slight tweak in our own minds that leads to a totally different experience of this person and of ourselves, where we choose to really accept and actually like want to desire that difference because of how it opens things up for us. It allows us to experience a more full spectrum, or just to have a more full experience of life. And the other person might not do that. The other person might not be able to accept you in the same way. But if you are setting that example, it's the best way to try to make that happen. If you are refusing to set the example and hoping that they're going to do that thing, this person, why should I be the person to accept? Why can't they accept me first? You're never going to do it, because you know it's the same thing as like when you're grappling, you're sparring, and you want the other person to let up, but you keep just like one-upping each other like that, and it gets more and more intense in the wrong way. You got to be the bigger person, and you got to step back and really feel. But it doesn't mean that you have to believe the same things that they believe or change your values to match their values. It means that you can kind of come up with a new value that is very important for you to be able to accept this other belief. I'll give you an example. I've got family who I love dearly. I have always loved and will always love them. And they are, not to bring it back to politics, but bring it back to politics, they are very differently informed and believe differently from what I believe in what's going on with the world and where it should be going. And we get into full-on arguments, and sometimes we yell at each other, and it's like up there with like some of the more intense experiences that I've had with people. And yet when it's done, I can first remember all of the reasons that I love this person from, you know, our past together, but also I can appreciate, like, this is somebody who I'm choosing to have in my life, and they are choosing to have me in their life. And even though we might fight like crazy sometimes, and even though we might believe completely different things, we can still have a great relationship and life together. And we have to find common ground. And with politics, just like with anything else, something that you can do is, you know, you might not agree with 90% of what's going on, but there's like a 10% that you can find common ground on. And you might even decide, like, you know what, both of us are going to spend our energy and time together working on this common ground. So finding common ground is kind of another way of looking at what I'm saying. But if you can't find common ground and all you ever see when you're with this person is this, it's not going to last. You're not going to have a fruitful experience or relationship or life together. So yeah, find the common ground, accept and choose that person exactly the way that they are and love them for it. All right, let me go back to this one that is written down. I've got to disappear. How to give constructive criticism to a new hire without making anybody feel down or too relaxed and casual where they don't improve. So a balance between giving somebody constructive criticism and just letting them just kind of fly with the way that they've been doing it, which is clearly not working. I've had this experience. When I was in college, I joined kind of like a painting cult. It was like a college painting company, and we hired other college kids to paint houses, and we like went around and, you know, I was like one of the salespeople that convinced people to let this group of kids paint their house who had just been trained on how to paint the house like a week earlier. And we usually did a fine job, not an amazing job, but the price was right, it was fine. But I had a couple of painters who were bad at painting, and they were slow and lazy, and I was too afraid to confront them on this. My nature is very non-confrontational, and like, I don't like ruffling feathers. I don't want to rock the boat. Like, I want everybody to love me. I cannot live with somebody not liking me because I was too hard on them. And what happened with that, nothing worked, right? The other painters were pissed off because everything was going so slowly. They were like, it's not fair that you're painting the other you're not painting the other person, you're paying the other person the same as you're paying us. It doesn't work for anybody. It didn't work for me, it didn't work for anybody. And it didn't work for the person who I was being too easy on because they didn't get the chance to grow. And I know you've got somebody who probably is there to learn from you and to get the best possible experience in this world. They're not going to get that from you just being too nice to them and saying, oh, that's nice, that's nice. I'll say the way that I deal with this now with you know, the people who I hire at the dojo is a little bit different from the way that I handle it with students, but it's similar enough. I'll just go with the way that we handle it with students. So kind of like I was talking about before, I expect big things from people. I want and push the students to get as much as they possibly can from their experience and from themselves. And they rarely get all the way to where I know that they can go, but it's not going to stop me from pushing it. In the beginning, when somebody comes in, unless they have straight up told me, I need you to be mean to me, I need you to yell at me because it's the only thing that I respond to. And if somebody tells me that, I will do it absolutely. And anytime you guys really want it, I will lay it on thick, and I'm great at it. But most people, that's a little bit too much for the first couple of classes or the first month or so. So you come in and I'm yelling at you and you're like, he hates me and I hate him and I hate this whole experience, I quit. It's just like if you came in the first class, we sparred and we just, you know, beat each other up. No one's going to come back for a second class unless they win at sparring, which doesn't usually happen on somebody's first class. So what happens? I hold your hand. I'm like, okay, you're doing great. And I point out the things that they're doing really well. And then I say, here's what I want you to fix. And I give them one thing that they need to improve upon. There is a great rule. It's called the rule of 3. So you are in a position to really help somebody. Maybe it's a senior student in the dojo, a teacher. Maybe it's a senior position in a company. Maybe it's somebody who you've hired and you are the boss. You know more than this person and you're trying to help them along. You give them Yes, so there are actually two different rules that I'm going to talk about. You give them 3 things in a day, and I do this in a class. If you give them any more than 3 things to fix, they are overwhelmed by it. They're not going to remember any of the things that you said, and their whole experience is just, she's nagging me, she hates me, I want to quit, okay? So 3 things or fewer. You cannot go 3 or more, because then that's tipped way too far in the, you know, the negative direction. But you also want to pair this with positive reinforcement, as I said before. So the way that we do this is you point out something that they're doing really well, and then in a kind of separate interaction is the best way to do this. You point out something that they can fix. One thing. And then you make sure that you give them another positive reinforcement. And the way this works in the dojo is, it might feel sometimes like I'm just, you know, just blowing smoke at you, and it's like, oh, it's so nice, everything. Of course, Sifu doesn't think that I'm as amazing as he says that I am. Again, the truth is, I think that you are amazing, and your kick might suck today, but it's going to get better. So that's why I'm pointing out the things that are good about it, so that you keep doing the things that are good, but we're going to add things until you get better. But there are going to be times that you come to class and you are just not trying as hard as I know that you can try. And I know you well enough to know that you are capable of more. And so I'm going to yell at you and get you to push yourself more. And sometimes you're going to have to remind me, Sifu, sorry, I have to remind you this. I broke my knee last week, so I can't actually go harder than this. And I say, absolutely, thanks for reminding me, but you can still punch harder, so go. We got to be able to mix positive and negative reinforcement and not let it be a manipulation. Be very clear on this for yourself and for them. And I'll tell you guys straight up, this is exactly how I do it. I'm going to tell you what you're doing well, and I'm going to tell you what you're doing poorly. And especially if you're newer, I'm going to give you more stuff that you're doing well so that you enjoy coming to class, and so that you recognize what you're doing well so that you keep doing it. And I'm going to give you some negative things that you're doing, constructive criticism, so that you can build on the things that you're already doing well. But it's not always going to seem quite so nicey nice. And when you take a more advanced test, or when you've been around for a long time in Tai Chi, I'm going to sometimes kind of give it to you in a way that's more straight and direct, because I know that you're capable of more. And you got to be able to do that, but only after you've built up a trust and a relationship with somebody that they can take what you're saying and not immediately shut down because they think that you hate them, or they think that you're just being a jerk, so they ignore what you're saying. It's a tough balance. It's a very difficult balance to walk with people. And it takes practice. So err on the side of giving them more positive, err on the side of giving them fewer things to fix, and then edge up to a place where you know that they're still listening to you and not feeling overwhelmed. But this is a good place to go, a good kind of rule to go by. No more than 3 things to fix in a day, and make sure you're sandwiching the constructive feedback, the negative criticism, with positive things that they're doing as well. This is going to be an interesting segue into talking about meditation, but sure, we have to do the same way with ourselves, right? Let's say you've got a bad meditation, and then after that meditation, you just beat yourself up. You're not going to want to meditate again. Let's say that in this meditation tonight, you're having a bad meditation because your mind is wandering so much, and you recognize that your mind is wandering. What do? You beat yourself up and you say, I suck at meditation. What's wrong with me? That is actually counterproductive, in the same way that you just constantly being negative to somebody else is counterproductive. You're actually trying to train your mind to come back to the breath. You've got to make it enjoyable. So when you recognize that your mind has wandered, you got to give yourself a positive experience, because you want to actually train that recognition of the mind having wandered, train that into your process of meditation, so that what you do is actually more often and more quickly recognize when the mind wanders. So when the mind wanders, instead of being angry at yourself, bring it back by just doing this. And don't do this loudly because you're gonna mess with everybody else's meditation. But I recognize that my mind has wandered. What do I want to be on? I want to be on the breath. Okay. So the way I come back to the breath is just a nice, relaxing, satisfying sigh that brings me right back to the breath. And if the mind wanders again, just bring it right back in the same way. It is a positive experience. It feels like you're coming home. You want the breath in meditation to be like that. I'm coming home. Home is where my mind is centered and calm and focused. And when you come home from a stressful trip or even a vacation, sometimes you want to just like clean everything up, and it's like you're still kind of on edge from the trip. But what you want to do is really appreciate the fact that you're home. You just drop your stuff next to the door, walk into the couch or to your bed, and just flop down and just love it. Sink into that couch and be like, yes, this is what I've been missing. And the breath should feel that way in meditation. Just ease back into it without falling asleep, without letting yourself wander into daydream, dreamland, but really enjoy that experience. So let's try that now. Sit, come.